One night, a very devoted father was tucking his 4-year-old son into bed and telling him his nightly Bible story. And on this occasion, it was the story of the prodigal son. They discussed, he and his little 4-year-old, all of the details at the level of a 4-year-old could understand, how the son had taken his inheritance early, and how he had spent all of his money living it up, eating all the candy he could, and being wild. And finally, he had no money left, and he had to go work on a pig farm. And then he finally thought, I could go back home to my father, ask for a job and forgiveness, and how his father had welcomed him with open arms. After Dad finished telling the story, he said to his young son, "And what did you learn from the story?" And the little boy said, "Never leave home without your credit card." Someone has been watching too much television. Have you ever noticed that some people are unhappy when someone else is treated well? It's not that they're being treated badly. It's just that someone else, who they don't think much of, is being treated well. There's a little resentment there. That person is inferior. Why are they having it so good? And the Pharisees clearly had this attitude. They had it all worked out, who was loved by God and who was not loved by God. They had the God side people and the reject pile, and they were definitely in the we're with God pile. But what was Jesus doing? Instead of coming to them and asking for their opinion on things and giving them all due honor, he was hanging out with lowlifes. He was even eating with them. This man welcomes sinners. By first century standards, if you shared a meal, that was a very intimate act. It implied that you approved of that person's lifestyle. And this is the context in which Jesus told the story of the prodigal son. Although we really should call this the story of the prodigal father, because it is the father whose behavior is so out of the ordinary. Prodigal can mean generous, abundant, or wasteful. Once upon a time, there were 2 sons. By law, the oldest got a double portion of what any other sons in the family got. So if there's a lot of sons, he didn't get as much. In the case of 2 sons, that was better for him. Of course, dowries also had to be provided for daughters. But it was almost unheard of to get your inheritance before your father died. And asking for it was absolutely forbidden. It would be like saying, "Drop dead, Dad, I want my money." And that's exactly what this younger son did. He wanted his inheritance, and he wanted it now. What would the normal response have been of a first century father? A clip around the ear and all of his spending money cut off. There's no way a normal father would have given in to this incredible request. This son might have even been disowned for having this kind of a temerity to ask this. How incredibly disrespectful. A father might decide to distribute some of his wealth before he died, but you never, ever asked. And furthermore, any son who received his inheritance ahead of time was expected to use it to support his parent. You didn't pack up and leave. Getting an inheritance did not mean you had the right to dispose of it. Land is supposed to stay in the family. Not this boy. He gets what's his and he sells immediately. If this had actually happened in a real first century village, nobody would have bought from this boy. Nobody respectable at any rate. He would have been forced to sell to a complete scoundrel. He would have never been given full value because people, honorable people, would have been too appalled to deal with him. And any father in the first century would have been ashamed to have a son that did such a thing. The neighbors would not only despise the son, they'd have some serious questions about the father for giving in to this outrageous request. So the younger son leaves town. He goes to the city and he lives large. Jesus said he wasted his money on riotous living. But when he had partied every last penny away, not only was he broke, famine hit. So he had no money, and he discovered very quickly that all of his good time friends vanished. He was desperate. So in order to survive, he hired himself out to a local farmer who sent him to feed the pigs. Now this is about as low as a poor Jewish boy could possibly get. He's working for a Gentile, feeding unclean animals, and he's jealous of the unclean animals because at least they have something to eat. This is where he has his "I've been a total idiot" moment. He realizes that he's starving, but back home, his father's servants have plenty to eat. That maybe he should go back home and ask for forgiveness and at least see if he could be taken on as a servant. But here's the interesting thing. You know, one of these things that we don't necessarily get when we have a translation, there are two words in Greek for servant. There's doulos, which means slave. And ordinarily we think, well, a slave is inferior. But no, a slave was part of the household. A slave could never be kicked out. A slave would always be clothed and fed and taken care of. And a slave could even be freed and inherit. But the second word is mythios, if I can pronounce it correctly. And that was a temp worker. That was a day laborer. Somebody you just happened to hire because you had some odd job work to do, but you had absolutely no obligation other than that. That's the word that is used here. The boy knows he really can't ask to be taken back into the household, but maybe his father would allow him to do some work around the place, here and there. Maybe he'd have enough money that he could eat and live on the outskirts of town. Even this apparently modest request would have been unthinkable by first century standards. If this boy had been spotted anywhere near his father's house, the neighbors would have been out armed with pitchforks, ready to drive him off. They would have absolutely been up in arms. There's no way this boy is coming back. Which is probably why when the father saw him at a distance, he ran. Because he had to get there before the pitchforks did. He had to get there before the boy was driven away. Now, there's no mother in this story, for the very simple reason that the father takes on the role of mother and father. In fact, the father behaves much more like a mother. In the traditional Jewish home, the story should have gone like this. Mom would see the son in the distance before anyone else, run out, grab him, and hide him in an outbuilding. Then she'd smuggle him some food and tell him to keep quiet and lay low. The negotiations would begin at that point. She'd come to her husband and say, "You know, darling, this son of ours, if he should ever want to come back, maybe we should take him back." And the father would say, "Never. I have no younger son. He's dead to me. I only have one son." And she'd leave it for a day, and then she'd come back. "But you know, this boy of ours, I carried him for 9 months. You know how cute he was when he was learning how to walk. You remember how proud you were when he made his bat mitzvah?" And he'd say, "I refuse. The son of mine is dead. I only have one son. I won't hear of it." This would go on for a week, maybe 2, until finally, the son would be permitted to prostrate himself before the father, beg for mercy, and for the right to be a servant. None of that happens here. The wayward son has prepared his speech. "Father, I have sinned. Against heaven and against you, I am no longer worthy to be called your son." He doesn't get any further than that. The father has already run out to meet him, an extremely undignified act. For the benefit of these vigilante neighbors, he publicly makes it very clear that this lost son's status is to be fully restored. He asked for a robe, a ring, and sandals, things that no servant had. He asked for all of the status symbols that a son of the house would have. And then he orders his servants to bring and slaughter the fattened calf so that they might have a feast to celebrate. Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This is extraordinary. And then there is hell to pay, because the brother comes back from the fields. Clearly, there's a party going on. Also, clearly, nobody told him about it. Nobody came out to the field to let him know. He was completely forgotten. So he asks, "What's going on?" And of course, the servants tell him that worthless, spoiled brat of a brother has come home, and instead of being made to pay for what he did, they've gone and killed the fatted calf and held a party for him. Well, isn't that just the last straw? Can you feel the resentment? What does the older son do? He refuses to go in. He's furious. And once more, the father takes on the role of a mother. The father in the first century wouldn't leave the party. He would send someone else. But in this case, he leaves. He personally goes to his son and speaks to him. As far as the first century conventions are concerned, the son here is totally out of line. His job was to honor his father by sucking it up no matter how he felt, going in and acting the part. He has separated himself from his father and the rest of the family by his actions. And he tells his father, "Look, after all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never even gave me so much as a young goat so I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? We can hardly blame him, can we? The elder son assumes that his brother spent his money on prostitutes, and he's probably right. But he's not really demanding that his brother be thrown out. What he is saying is this: for crying out loud, Dad, make him pay for what he did. Make him do the dirty work around here and sleep with the animals. Let me boss him around, because boy, I'll make sure he's sorry. He brought shame on this house. But instead, the father said, my son, you are always with me, and everything that I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. This is a remarkable story. And it is unusual in so many ways because of the nature of the father, who acts much more like a nurturing mother, extending grace and love to both of his sons. Now, for those of us who have been raised with a fire and brimstone, angry God who will strike us dead if we get out of line, this doesn't fit. But this is Jesus' understanding of God. This is how Jesus portrays God to us. This is a God who doesn't care what the neighbors think as long as the kids are okay. This is a God who gives us a lot of leeway to mess up and then welcomes us home. And this is a God who will go outside in order to find his angry, resentful children and bring them in. We have all been the prodigal son, even the most staid among us, because what the younger son did was to separate himself from his father and take his inheritance to do with it as he pleased. Our inheritance from God is who we are, everything we have, all of our gifts. And what we do is we say, it's mine. I'm going to do with my life what I please. I'm going to use it or abuse it in any way that I want, self-indulgent or otherwise. It's mine. We all try to go our own way, even if our choices are quote-unquote respectable. We all try self-sufficiency, when in fact we were created to be in constant communion with God, our loving heavenly parent. And the truly amazing thing is that even for those of us who have made a complete and utter mess of our lives, God waits with open arms for us to come home. There are no recriminations. There's no shaming. There's no earning our way back. We're just back. All of us also know what it's like to be the older brother, the one who does all the work and seems to get none of the credit. We work hard, keep our nose clean, do what's right, but who gets all the attention? That idiot who shouldn't have left in the first place. We feel invisible and taken advantage of. It's not fair. But God seeks us out too, because our injured pride is just as offensive before God as all those outrageous acts are. And we too need forgiveness. Our prodigal father seeks us out, inviting us to come home and to come in out of the darkness and the cold. When we are hurt, when we are angry, we are welcomed in. Amen.